Okay, so we're all set, I think. So welcome, thank you, everybody. I feel like we've got people from all over, actually. I thought it would be mainly a US crowd, but it's not exclusively. So welcome, everybody. I'm in London. You can probably tell by the accent. And I'm Deborah, and I started Solo in Style quite a few years ago, really as a sort of a platform for ladies over 50 who were traveling solo for whatever reason, or wanted to start, or were just interested in solo travel. And Heather and I met a few months ago and thought it would be a great idea if we put together something that we could offer that was very informative for the group. So Heather, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Heather Markel. I am a solo traveler over 50, but I also am someone who worked in corporate for over 25 years, got fed up, feeling like I was waiting my life away for retirement, and took a career break back in 2017. I quit. I thought it was for 6 months to go travel the world and come back. And then the Great Resignation happened, and the pandemic. I got marooned in New Zealand for 2 years. And I've now, instead of taking a 6-month break, I've been traveling for I think this is year 6 of traveling full time. And I am so inspired because I'm finding that when I quit, I think people thought I was nuts. And now I think it's fast becoming very normal. Remote work has been normalized. And from what I see, one of the largest growing groups to embrace this lifestyle are the over 50 crowd, many of whom I certainly don't consider myself retired. So there's a lot of people that aren't waiting for that. We're monetizing as we go, or finding a way to travel for a while and then go back to something and then go out a while. So many different ways to live this amazing lifestyle. And so I just love talking about it and empowering other people to begin the full-time travel lifestyle themselves.
Yeah, well, you just mentioned you've been doing this now for 6 years, I think, right? So, so where have you been? I mean, I feel like every time I talk to you, you've been somewhere else.
Yes,
exciting. So where have you been? What are your favorite places?
So I just was in country 35. So I was in Malaysia and South Korea. One of the things about this lifestyle is because I have time, I don't like racing through places anymore. So while I probably in 6 years could have literally been to every country in the world, I've slow traveled. So I've been to New Zealand, Peru, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, it really is a country, Argentina, Costa Rica, Nicaragua. I think the only continent I haven't done right now is Antarctica. So I was in Argentina, I was in Ushuaia, I met 2 people going out on a boat to Antarctica like 2 days later, who said I was welcome to come down to the docks and see if there was an extra space on the boat. So tip to you guys, if you ever want to go to Antarctica and you don't want to pay $10,000 or $20,000, you could go last minute to Ushuaia and go down to the docks and see if there's a spare room. That means you get what you get. You can't be picky, but it will probably save you a lot of money, just as a tip. So I didn't do it. I'm glad I didn't, because I learned the people coming back, the 2 days I would have gone out, had 40 hours of swell.
Oh my goodness, no.
Strapped to the bed.
Yeah, not good, not good.
Yeah.
Then, and you mentioned sort of slow travel. Well, you mentioned, first of all, being stuck in New Zealand for a very long time, which I think is a good place to be stuck.
Yes.
Sure,
yes.
You possibly wanted to get home, but at one point, so slow travel. So you take your time. So how long, would you stay in places, or have there been places where you kind of not felt great and you've moved faster than others? Are there somewhere you've stayed longer?
So at this point, I try to stay in one country for a minimum of a month. Right. And, things change, because when I first started, it was sort of, I did a few months at a time, then it became 10 months at a time. Then I was marooned in New Zealand, and now I have aging parents, so I have to tweak a little bit my traveling.
Like this is marooned.
I'm gonna move. Yeah, who is that?
Yeah. I didn't like marooned.
So, And now, so the slow traveling is, I did actually end up in Argentina. I went to a place called El Chalten, which is known for its hiking and its beautiful views. I just didn't like it because it was like they built the town for tourists. So while you could hike during the day, which is lovely, I just felt like it was too touristy for me, and I had booked longer, and I left sooner just because I just didn't like it. So, but other than that, I typically now try to book about a week. Knock on wood, I haven't been anywhere that I was like, oh God, I can't manage a week here.
Yeah.
I have, when I was in Malaysia, it was interesting. I went to a town called Ipoh, which when I first got there, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. I think I made a mistake booking like 4 or 5 days. And then it ended up that the town of Ipoh doesn't have much, but around Ipoh, there's just a plethora of amazing things to see. So, so I was really happy. So sometimes, and even actually when I was in South Korea, I had come from, Malaysia's hot, sweaty, humid. People are very curious. They were always asking me where I was from. I felt like I was in conversation with people all the time. Come up to South Korea. I believe I flew in the storm that washed away all of the cherry blossoms. And then it was freezing cold and no eye contact and not much English spoken. And the first week I was there, I almost gave up and left.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of, and I'm really glad that I stayed, because I'll tell you what, after a month, even 2 or 3 weeks in Korea, I came to really love it.
Yeah. I mean, that can happen on any length of trip, can't it? I mean, you can go on vacation for a couple of weeks and just some weeks are absolutely fabulous, and other times for whatever reason, it's just not sort of clicking. I mean, and I have never done, the longest I've ever traveled for when I volunteered a few years ago was 3 months in Brazil. But normally I am a sort of a more sort of, I don't know what we would call short-term traveler. I'm still working, so I do sort of 2 weeks or what have you. And I really sometimes feel a little bit overwhelmed or a little bit, struggle a little bit to think, where am I going to go? It's like, when you can go anywhere, where should I go? So how do you even decide where you're going to go? And, once you're there, where do you go next? And do you have a plan? Do you map it all out? Do you go with the flow?
Yeah, that's such a charged question. I wrote an ebook about it because there's so many different ways. So when I first started, I was really following my heart, because I found with my head, it's funny, I'm like, I quit my job, I can go anywhere in the world. Oh my God, the world is huge.
Yeah,
There's a lot of airports, a lot of places. So I kind of went where I felt called to go. So a lot of it is if I feel something. I mentioned South Korea, and literally I wanted that green tea from Jeju Island. I wanted to go to Jeju Island because of this tea. That was my draw for South Korea. And then Malaysia, I actually, I had never been, and I'd heard about Kuala Lumpur from a former colleague, and who ironically, I hadn't heard from for 20 years. And literally 3 weeks before I was going to Kuala Lumpur, he just appeared and wrote me a message. So, and then I think, New Zealand, I went because actually I was on my way to Australia to see a friend. So sometimes it's about, I have a friend I want to see, or a family member. So Reunion Island, I actually have a friend. So I'm going to go stay with my friend. I met her working in Paris years ago. So, so really it's a mixture of feeling, people, and sometimes, Reunion Island, Asia, really, in Africa, long flights.
Yeah.
So these are ideal places to go when you have time, as opposed to, I used to always go to Europe because it's a quick 6-hour flight. I'm in Paris, boom, and I can not have too much jet lag and explore. So sometimes it's really taking advantage of the time that I have to go far away.
Yeah, and so that's a question that's just come in. Yeah. Do flights play into the decisions? Which is a great question. And I was also going to say, as much as we all would like to be sort of go with the, whichever the way the wind blows, you have things like visas, you have things like, entry requirements, all of this. So there is some planning. So maybe you can talk to the flight question, and then also the sort of how do you handle all of
So-
that insurance, all of those kinds of things. Yeah.
Well, regarding the flights, one of my big strategies is, and one of the reasons I've been able to travel so long is I charge everything to either a air points card or a hotel points card. So I fly, my trip to Reunion Island is something, it would have been $2,000. I paid like 100,000 points and $20. To get to New Zealand, it was a really good deal, 40,000 points, less than going to Europe, and 26 US dollars. So yes, I try to use my points. I will say in this new world, it is getting more complicated. Sometimes there's fewer direct flights where I want to go. And then it becomes, oh, if I'm gonna have to take 3 or 4 different flights on different airlines, my bags probably aren't going to make it. So let's try something else. So cost of flights absolutely does play a role. There were other places I was looking at and that were just too expensive and I didn't go. And then in terms of managing, you mentioned you wanted me to talk to.
Well, you obviously visas are an issue.
Yeah.
Just one issue, and then there's a kind of much bigger question, which is perhaps a little bit more wider about, because I always think, how on earth could I go for so long? What do I do with my mail? What do I do? Do I have a home address? How do you keep a home base? So that's probably a slightly separate thing to, you do have to think about, do you need vaccinations? Do you need all of that? So I guess there's a planning.
I just got, I renewed a bunch of my vaccinations before this trip. Those are expensive, so make sure you have good health insurance that covers them. Visas, yes, can be really expensive. And it depends. Like I remember when I went to Vietnam, there were 2 kinds of visas. There was a single entry and a multiple entry. And I did the multiple entry because I knew I'd be bouncing around Asia. So I wanted to be able to go to Vietnam, go to Thailand, and then come back to Vietnam. So that one was more expensive. A lot of countries, and this is very much a matter of what country you are from. So Americans often get a standard 90-day free visa included with landing. I know that I think the European Union was going to do this ETSIAS thing, and I think they scrapped it for now. But so you have to stay on top of the visa requirements. The way I do that as an American is I go to the travel.gov website that we have. So each country, I think you should have your own government run website that tells you that this is really important, the entry and the exit requirements. So while you're focused on the entry, do you need a visa? As a full-time traveler who has tons of time, you need to be aware of how much time you actually have. And I'm often booking one-way tickets, which raises an eyebrow. I have been stopped at the airport and asked a lot of questions, like when I was going to Colombia, and they're like, you're not coming back. Like, and Costa Rica, I knew I had to show immigration proof of exit. So what I did is I bought a bus ticket. I paid $30 US for a bus ticket from Costa Rica to Panama. And I knew that I wasn't going to use it, but it was what immigration wanted to see. The other thing you can do, just heads up, is I would use this as a second, like last option, but if you have points, and actually, even if you don't, you should be able to book a flight out of the country and have 24 hours to cancel it and get all your money back if you had to do that.
Yeah, that question comes up quite a lot in the Facebook group about what happens if you have a one-way ticket and are you stopped at the point of entry if you can't show. And yeah, I mean, I have never had that happen to me, but obviously that is something that may.
It does happen.
Yeah, that may happen. And so, I mean, it sounds like such an ideal lifestyle, but who do you think should is not the right word, but who do you think it would appeal to the most, or perhaps the best type of person to benefit from this? Who should stay away from it because they're probably never going to kind of love it? I mean, are there any kind of traits or any professions or anything that you think would sort of draw you to that lifestyle more than others?
So I definitely have learned that this is not a life for someone running away. So if you're running away from a boss, you're running away from bad situations, they will all follow you. So like my first year of travel was very inward. I didn't expect that. It was really, I did a TEDx talk and I talk about how it's kind of like an adult vision quest. And it really is, because, you know, here I am, I arrive in, I remember like, well, Costa Rica, I actually had a meltdown. After 2 weeks, so this is the thing, if you're used to vacation travel, at the 2-week mark is when you suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm not on vacation.
Coming home, yeah.
What am I doing? The universe conspired perfectly for me. I almost gave up, came home and asked for my job back. But instead, I ended up having the epiphany that created my life of full-time travel. When I went to Portugal, I met people that brought up patterns in my life and issues and self-esteem problems for me. And I made the choice to confront them, to look at how I am creating this and what do I need to do to change this. So, you know, that was very difficult, but this is the thing, when you're traveling full time, it's really, especially if you're solo, you realize you've got no one else to hold accountable for your experience but you.
Yeah.
So you need to be the type of person that goes, hell yes, and I can change my experience. And if you're not, you probably won't like it. I also think that, you know, this is a life where every day can be different. You don't know what to expect. If you're used to sleeping in your own bed, you're not going to be doing that anymore. Beds can be really firm. They can be lumpy. Pillows can be too thick. They can be too thin. I have slept in rooms with lizards. I have been in a tent with cockroaches. You know, Easter Island, I was in a youth hostel, giant cockroaches. Like, you know, you're in paradise. And so this is like anything goes. And you also, if you're introverted, I think, I don't want to judge, because introverts and extroverts are actually, there's so many different kinds, but this is a life where also you're probably best suited for, if you're willing to step outside your comfort zone, talk to people, make eye contact where you can, meet other people, especially if you're traveling solo, because you don't want to be on your own. So so I think you want to be someone that learns to be adaptable and doesn't carry the, well, at home I would get this circumstance and this treatment, how come you don't do that here? Like, that's not conducive.
That's not conducive really on any kind of travel, in my view, but anyway.
Absolutely.
So are there sort of ways, do you think then, that people can sort of dip a toe in the water? And, you know, are there some good ways of starting out, testing it to see if it's a lifestyle, you know, that you want? Is there anything you can recommend for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best thing you can do if you're in a position where you want to quit or take a sabbatical, as opposed to working remotely, let's say, or just, you know, retire or something. I would go for a short time. And so if you're typically used to taking 1 to 2 week vacations, and you have it, and you can take a month or take 6 weeks, take that all together and see what you feel about, do you enjoy like carrying your luggage with you? Because that's another thing. Unless you are going first class, you're going to be hauling your own bags. And sometimes that's up staircases. Sometimes that's cobblestone streets where the wheels don't work that great. So I take a lot of buses, and buses are great for saving money on luggage, but they're not the most comfortable, especially when you are, I mean, Argentina, there's like 18 and 22-hour bus rides. So so test out, one, do you enjoy being away that long? 2, what kind of traveler are you? Are you the first class traveler and you have to do that? Are you the youth hostel person? Are you something in the middle? Find that out, because that also correlates directly to your travel budget. So yeah, I think there's a lot of
lots of things to consider. But you mentioned budget. I mean, budget's a big one, I would imagine. So, you know, what are strategies for, so how do you plan, first of all? How would you, or do you do a budget for your, are you disciplined in that way? And then how do you support that lifestyle? Are there ways that you can work? I know that you obviously have your business that you do at workers, but sort of, so kind of 2-part question, I guess, budgeting and then also kind of ways of supporting yourself as you do it.
Yeah, so it's funny. I have a Facebook group as well, and I met two of the people in my group in Korea. First time we're meeting, we get our coffees, we sit down, and I said, "Excuse me for a moment, I just have to log my expense." And they said, "No worries, we have to do the same thing." They
Right.
got it, right? So one thing full-time travelers do is absolutely account for
Log
every
everything.
expense.
Wow.
And you do need a budget. So yes, I have a budget.
Right.
And I learned early on, I was shocked that traveling full time is cheaper than a fixed life in one place,
Mm.
because you're paying rent, and you're getting bottles of olive oil and shampoo and all these big things that you don't need when you travel. And also something to note is that full-time travel is very different than vacation travel. So
Yeah, you're not
Yeah,
eating out every night, and you're not. Yeah.
well, you could be. So for example, Malaysia, it's $2 a meal, US.
Right.
So actually, it was probably cheaper for me to eat out than try to find a grocery store, which was hard to find, or buy chicken feet, or like whatever.
Yeah.
So it depends, but where you are in the world. But yeah, so really, you kind of need to figure out what your individual budget is, and what your travel style is, and then where can you exist within that paradigm,
Right.
and for how long. So so I do all of that myself and use a bunch of strategies. I mentioned earlier the points for travel. I cashed in on Marriott points just now in South Korea, and then I might stay at a Marriott and pay for it in a cheaper place and build up points and free nights, right? So so it's sort of a lot of different strategies that go into how to afford full-time travel.
And you mentioned logging your expense. Do you have an app that you use, or do you put it in on a spreadsheet, or?
I started with a spreadsheet and just found it easier to use an app that's called iExpensit.
Right.
So there's a free version and a paid version. I have the paid version, and what I do now is I set it up by country. I just started doing that this year, so I can see kind of by country what I'm spending.
Right.
And you also have to, you asked me a question earlier about mail and stuff, and
Yes.
so I gave up my home, and I rented an apartment in New York, and gave that up. And I, at the time that I gave it up, thought I was only traveling another year, which is why I put my stuff in storage, thinking I would take it out of storage a year later. I would strongly recommend, if you aren't sure how long you're going, that you, instead of using storage, downsize as much as possible. Because there's like, I had a TV unit that I had gotten from IKEA. It was like a year old. I loved it. I could have sold it for $50. And at the time I thought, $50 when I paid like $600, I can't do that. But now it's been sitting in a bigger storage unit because
money. Yeah.
I should have just gotten rid of it. Right. So, and then mail, I'm lucky that my mom has a residence here, so I use her address for mail. If you just give up everything, I think if you Google, I think it's called remote mail services. There's a plethora of ways for you to get a paid service where they can either hold on to your mail or scan your mail so you can see what's there. And failing that, if you have a friend or a relative who can get your mail for you, then care of.
Yeah, exactly. So we are open to questions for those people who joined us a little bit later on, perhaps. So anybody have any questions, please type them in the chat box. We've only had a couple so far, so it doesn't have to be questions. If you've got comments or tips, things that you're doing that you would like to share with the group, or anything you'd like to share, here you go. Do you notice a difference on taxes that you have to pay? Does traveling affect how much federal income tax you pay? Great question.
Yeah, so I don't pay, I only pay, there was like New York, I'm sorry, I forget if it's like city and state or federal in New York. I don't pay New York taxes anymore because I'm officially not a resident. I don't live in any one place for 6 months or more. So working with my accountant, he said I didn't need to pay that anymore. So that's a bonus. Of course, I've got no withholding on my income. So, like when I worked in corporate, at the end of the year, I'd get a refund every year. Now, of course, I don't. But I do have an accountant, and I recommend that you do too, because I mean, the worst thing I can imagine is either not filing your taxes on time or getting in some international weird thing it's just easier to have someone that knows what they're doing help you file it correctly.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I mean, I think that might be something, I mean, if I think about possibly going with that kind of lifestyle, that is the thing, those are the things, and they're sort of little things, but they're not little things, they're huge things. Like what do you know, but that. And we have another question now. USPS has a service that scans your mail. Oh, thank you.
Yep.
This one, Dawn. Yeah,
I use that too.
Images. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Healthcare comes up a lot too. So I know a lot
There
of
you
people.
go. Travel insurance, yeah, healthcare insurance, all of that for
So
sure.
I would say, so I use an expat insurance plan. I mean, there's things like Safety Wing where, you know, there's travel insurance, so look where you insure your flight. There's theft insurance where you can insure your stuff. I used to use World Nomads for that, and I've come to feel like the fact is that my camera and computer, which are the more valuable things I travel with, would depreciate in value so much that the insurance I'm paying to cover that I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah.
But I do have health insurance, and I'll tell you, one of my biggest things was, I'm in New York, I have all my doctors, what will I do if I go overseas? And, you know, so I was just in Malaysia. So I had knee surgery last November in New York, did physical therapy in New York, went traveling, had some trouble with my knee. And here I am in Malaysia. I mean, I have all kinds of ideas about what Malaysia's medical system is like. A fellow traveler gave me the name of a physical therapist company that she used and liked. I went there, her therapist wasn't available. I got a woman named Rebecca. She was hands down probably one of the best physical therapists I've ever had. And I kid you not, she videoed things for me. I saw her maybe 5-6 weeks ago. She has checked on me on WhatsApp. And when I told her I was still having trouble, she videoed another exercise for me to do to like compensate for that problem. Like seriously, if I could go back to her, I would go back to her.
Yeah.
So you never know when you go overseas, there's some really good healthcare. It's also significantly cheaper. Another thing, I have an inhaler I travel with. I tried refilling it here on my insurance plan. It was $240. I'm like, no, thank you. That's with insurance coverage. Went to Malaysia, got the same one for $12.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we shouldn't assume that it everywhere is provides a worse service than where we are. That's not necessarily the case at all. Yeah.
There are places, I mean, Argentina, and I think Oman, I was told, not so good medical care there. So yes, there are places I would be more worried, and I'd want to check that there's an expat hospital. And I might, depending on my situation, not go to certain places where I'm worried that there wouldn't be good medical care.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So on that note, Rima's asked another question about health insurance. You mentioned World Nomads. Do you have a health insurance company you recommend? One for travel, does it still cover you in the US in case something happens whilst you're there?
Yes, so I use Cigna Global. And I think it might be Blue Cross Blue Shield that is the other company that offers an expat insurance plan. So the pricing depends fully on what state you're in and how you're using it. So in the plan I bought, I'm allowed 6 months medical care in America. And after 6 months, if I tried a 7-month, and that's within an insurance year, so they could decline me if I do more than 6 months. But I'm like, when I was in New Zealand, I was 100% covered the whole time. If I'm outside of America, I'm just not like totally covered. Once I've met my deductible, I have a co-insurance, and they handle everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of insurance when you travel in all its formats. Yeah. So another question from Charlotte, back to the accountant topic. Do you have recommendations for ones who are aware of travel and tax points, or where to look to find one?
I've used the same accountant for like so long. I don't personally recommend anyone specific. Charlotte, it's probably a great question to ask in our Facebook group as well. I'm certainly happy to refer you to mine, but I don't know. He's in New York State. I don't know how accountants work, if they're allowed to work with anyone anywhere, probably, but
There
I-
must
I
be a
don't-
federation, there must be a group, certainly there is in the UK, there's a federation of qualified accountants that you can kind of look for one in your area. And
Yeah.
yeah.
But Charlotte, if you want, hit me up afterwards. I'll give you my accountant, and maybe someone in our group knows someone as well.
Mm. So Rosalind has just asked the question I was about to ask you. So thank you, Rosalind, you're a mind reader. How safe do you feel when traveling alone? I mean, this is no matter how long you're going for, it's a very relevant question. So
It is. It's funny because the year I went to South America and Africa, I didn't feel unsafe, but when I got to Northern Europe, I noticed, that's when I hadn't noticed for 9 months. All of a sudden I noticed I was looking behind my back everywhere I went. And I'm like, oh, this is what I've adopted to feel safe in other places. And I don't need to do this anymore. So, I do mostly feel safe. And also I have a set of rules that I've adopted for myself that work for me. And I would recommend any solo traveler adopt their own set of rules. I do think women have a different situation than men, obviously. And one thing is I learned, for example, in South America specifically, do not accept an evening invitation with a man if you're not sexually interested in him. I don't drink with strangers. I don't actually, unless I'm like staying at a hotel or something which has a bar in the lobby and I know I can go back up to my room, or I buy a bottle of my own wine. I don't drink by myself. It's just not a good idea. If I am in a place that I know, like Peru, when I was in Lima, I do my research, and I was aware that there were parts of the city, like Miraflores, I was told, was the safest area for tourists. So I paid what was probably more money to stay in Miraflores than other places. I also took a taxi home at night, and I learned that Uber in Lima, in Peru, was considered less safe than, I think it was called Cabify or something. So I try to stay informed with specific places. When I check into a place, I always ask, is it safe for me to walk home alone at night?
Exactly.
And if the person I'm asking even has to think, if they're like, they hesitate for 2 seconds, I take that as a not sure or a no. If they tell me not to go to specific areas, that's the second question, are there places I shouldn't go as a tourist? If they tell me that, I listen. When I was in Cape Town, I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to walk to the V&A waterfront. I was staying in the center of town. And I asked at the front desk, could you point me in the direction of how I walk to the waterfront? And the concierge said, madam, you don't walk to the waterfront, you take a taxi. And I was like, but it's not that far. So, and the one day I walked just like 3 blocks away from the hotel in broad daylight, somebody looked me up and down. I had nothing valuable, but they were totally checking me out. So I like zipped up my jacket and I didn't dare walk out of the specific neighborhood again by myself. And also I made tons of friends in the community that was right near where I was staying. So, yeah, it's important that you inform yourself, you do your research and pay attention and don't do things that are not smart.
So, I mean, I don't travel with things like extra locks for the door and wedges for underneath the door and all of that. I just don't. But I know a lot of women in my group do. And do you take kind of gadgets with you, safety gadgets with you?
I do. So I don't take mace because, like, if the wind blows,
Oh, it's illegal in some places as well.
I have a let's see, I've got a chargeable device that can be a flashing strobe light and makes a really irritating loud noise. I also have I think it's called a birdie. Luckily I haven't had to use them, so I can't attest to how they are, but the birdie thing, you just like, it's a device that you pull out the top and it makes that really annoying noise. And I also bought something that you can put in a window, so or a door. So if somebody opens the door or the window from the outside, it emits the loud noise. Also, I have to say, there was a story several years ago about an Airbnb, like a woman that was staying in an Airbnb and she was murdered, and like whoever had the keys to the place. It was this whole story, and it just made me think, like, I feel safer in places I'm staying with groups or like where there's other people nearby. So
Right. Good point.
I consider that as well.
So we've got a few questions. So one here, is there a Facebook group separate from your Facebook group, Heather Begins?
Yes. So it's called Full-Time Travelers and Nomads.
There you go. And then also from Rima, how do you handle your passport? Do you carry a copy of it? Or are you able to get 2 actual hard copies? Oh, I don't know. Can you get 2 hard?
No,
No,
I have a copy of my passport uploaded to the cloud, and I carry the physical passport. Now, let me tell you, when I went to Machu Picchu, I either forgot, I don't know what happened, but for some reason, I think I had left my physical passport in the room. And thank God I had the cloud copy, because that enabled me to print it and go to Machu Picchu, which I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. So you always want a backup copy. Also, if it gets stolen, that's being able to print it out allows you to get the new passport. There have been several times when I'm just out and about and I don't have my passport, and being able to show somebody the physical, like the picture of it, has worked. It doesn't always. Like, it wouldn't work for a visa, and it's not going to work for if you get like tax back or something, but there's a number of scenarios where the picture will work.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I read it quite often in my group about ladies who've lost their phones, and that happens. And I mean, we all kind of have so much on our phones these days. I mean, I normally travel with a small laptop, but I can't imagine losing my phone. I feel like, oh my goodness, I have it all in the cloud like you, but
Yeah.
we rely so much on that. Sorry.
The other thing you want to do, speaking of phone, sorry to interrupt, but I have a VPN, and I strongly recommend getting a VPN. I use CyberGhost. I think there's TunnelBear, there's other ones, but the one time my credit card was hacked was in, I think it was in Namibia, where I was trying to buy a train ticket for France. My VPN was making something wonky went on, and I took it off to make the purchase, and it was hacked literally instantly. So you definitely, I don't do financial transactions anymore unless I really have to, and those will be done on my computer, not my cell phone. And even on the computer, I use the VPN. So strongly recommend.
These are great tips, no matter how long you're traveling for. I'm probably very reckless with my kind of logging in on Wi-Fi's God knows where, and good. Yeah, that's a really good point. Patricia just shared some information about each state has an board of accountancy. So thank you for that. Finding an accountant who might be able to help. We've sort of touched on it a little bit about full-time travel and being gone for longer lengths of time. So do you feel lonely? Do you have ways that do you join meetups when you go places? Do you look out for groups? Do you like eating on your own? So many people hate eating alone. And when you're on your own, that is kind of, I guess, your life, unless you make an effort not to.
So most of the time I don't feel lonely, but for example, South Korea, I really did. I mean, it was very noticeable. There was no eye contact, and I actually got rejected from a restaurant the first week I was there because I was on my own. And I learned that in South Korea, this is just like, there are certain places, if you want a barbecue or sukiyaki, they expect you to be a table of 2. What I do to mitigate loneliness is, first off, I'm very outgoing. So typically I'm going to chat up somebody. I do free walking tours is my #1 favorite thing. It's free.
I love doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's usually, it's really fun. When I went to Zagreb last summer, I met 3 lovely women and this Dutch guy, all of whom are single and travelers. And the Dutch guy and I met up like a month later in Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina and had a beer. And then I so I hardly check my Instagram messages. And when I was in Penang, Malaysia, he was there at the same time, and I missed him because I like didn't check my message. But isn't that cool that someone I met from a free walking tour shows up like lots of places? I did a tour in Thailand, met this lovely woman from England who at the time had quit her job and was traveling the world for a year. And she and I had similar birthdays. So we had a birthday dinner together, and then we met up in Santiago, Chile, like a while later. And free walking tours, paid tours, depending on your budget, can also be another way to meet great people. Although sometimes in a paid tour, you take like a big bus and you people are with their families or friends,
Right.
and they're not as chatty. So if you can take a class, but honestly, like going into, I've made some great friends by going to the same coffee shop or the same restaurant. So what I mentioned earlier about the slow travel, live somewhere for 1 to 4 weeks, go to the same place for breakfast or coffee or whatever every day. And the server is going to notice you. The locals, the regulars are going to notice you, and it's going to get easier and easier to smile and like meet people. And I'm still in touch with some of the baristas that I've met like around the world. And I think that just smiling and making eye contact, and not this eye contact,
Yeah,
actual
exactly.
eye contact.
Being open to talking to people, because I find as a solo, you'd invariably end up in conversation with somebody. I mean, often it can just be a very casual conversation, but quite often you meet people who end up being sort of either travel buddies along the way or lifelong friends. It's
I haven't used this as much, but I have met several people that also use the dating apps as friend apps.
right.
So they'll meet people up. I, for a variety of reasons, don't feel so comfortable with that. But if you do,
Right.
I would just make sure you have a phone or a video chat with the person before you meet them.
Yeah.
But that is another way to meet people.
So got some more questions. What about driver's license, international driving license? Does that work in most countries? I have no idea, actually.
So funny, when I was just in Korea, I didn't know that I needed an international driver's license to rent a car. I think it does. I don't know if it works in every country. I would say in America, we have AAA. I would ask them.
Yeah.
If you do plan to drive, I usually don't drive, but if you do, I would strongly recommend getting the international driver's license. And also, like I said, ask your appropriate motor vehicle association if it's good. And if you can't find that out from them, then contact the consulate or embassy for the countries that you're going to and ask them.
Yeah. I depending where I am, I may or may not drive, but yeah, I don't know. You're right. You would have to ask the relevant.
Yeah.
But you've got quite a few sort of comments coming back in about meetups. I think lots of ladies I know use local meetups, and also how to find the free walking tours. And yeah, Charlotte, you're right. Just Google. And yes, we should all tip those people because they don't get paid. Lots of them are students who are studying, and they use it as a way of getting a little bit of income, and I think we should tip them for sure.
Yeah.
And Charlotte has just read my mind, because I just was jotting down as you were talking about strategies to make money along the way. That was going to be my next point. Actually, whilst we're still just on that meeting thing, Charlotte, again, be welcome. Is it supposed to be similar to couch surfing? Have you used that? I've never heard of Be Welcome, actually.
I haven't, I haven't used couch surfing either, because while I actually in Peru, Colombia, I met some wonderful couch surfing hosts just randomly, like traveling around, and they were lovely, and I totally would have stayed with them. But there is a reputation it has as being a hookup. And traveling by myself, I personally just don't.
I wouldn't.
I don't use it, but plenty of women do, and they're fine. I'm just saying that's, again, these are my rules that I live by.
Yeah.
You can make your own.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know Be Welcome.
Yeah.
In terms of ideas to make money. So I was really lucky that early on in my travels, I believe in opportunity, and I believe opportunity is all around us, and you have to just keep your eyes and ears open. So something crossed my radar about a writing opportunity for an online magazine about travel. So I'm like, hell yes. So I applied to them. They took me on as a trial basis, and then I became like one of their regular writers. Intriguingly, they just massively downsized. So I thought that was over, but luckily I made the short list of like writers they're going to continue working with. So that's part, they pay for my articles and my photos. So if you can't get a like consistent writing gig, that's okay. If you enjoy writing, there are plenty of places that it takes work. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but you can certainly pitch writing to any number of newspapers, magazines, online companies about traveling, and some places pay really nice. So that's one thing you can do. I also, I think saving money while you travel, because everyone focuses on the making money, but I believe that part of affording travel is also not spending as much. So having good strategies to do that. And of course, I have a business. I'm both a business coach and a full-time travel coach. So I also earn money like helping other people grow their business or learn how to transition to the full-time travel lifestyle. So if you have a skill set that you love, that you can make a business out of, that's a great thing to take on the road with you, including I have seen amazing people they paint, they make jewelry, and they travel, and they actually just, lay out a cloth on the road and they sell their wares. Obviously, you have to check that things are legal, but I met a woman in Costa Rica from Germany. She was a hairdresser. So she traveled around and cut people's hair, and they gave her some money. So, and in New Zealand, they have something called koha, which is like donations. So while it's not legal to solicit people to pay you for a service as a foreigner, you can, for example, conduct a yoga class or a whatever class and just say it's on donation. And at the end, you can say, if you like my class, please consider making a donation, and then it's legal. So, yeah, it sort of like depends on where in the world you are, and what your skill set is as to how you make money along the way. Yeah.
There's lots of, you can be a virtual assistant, you can do
so many things.
proofreading, you can do translation if you have a language skills.
You can do remote work.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that you can try to have an income as you're traveling around. So Charlotte says she does seasonal work in the US.
Yeah.
And to your point about keeping costs down, Rima's asking about house or pet sitting, which I know lots and lots and lots of people do. And I think that's what you were doing when you were in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, I love house sitting. So on the plus side, house sitting is amazing. It gets you to see a place in more of a local context. Sometimes the place comes with a car. You get the companionship of animals, which I love. So all of that's amazing. The downside is it's highly competitive. And even if you have the open mind to say, I'll travel wherever there's a house sit, it's still competitive. Asia has I use trusted house sitters. They have very few opportunities. I met a woman in Malaysia, and she was maybe European, and she was a house sitter too. And she said, if you're not seeing any house sit opportunities, it's because I got there first. And she said Asians just don't lend their homes to strangers. That's a gross judgment. I don't know that that's true about all Asians, but on trusted house sitters, there were, I found that the house sitting services are really excellent in places like Europe, places like, and not all of Europe, but some of Europe, America, New Zealand, Australia. Once you get to more obtuse places, it gets harder and harder. So yes, I love it. And I would recommend it to keep costs down, but you can't completely rely on it unless you're the kind of person that literally can be like, I'm in Guatemala, there's no house sits, I'll just fly to Egypt tomorrow because I can get one,
Yeah. And Charlotte says there's also Workaway and World Packers. And there was another one as well that I found where you could
WWOOFing, Worldwide Organic Farming.
Yeah, you go and work on farms and things and get your board and things for and there's quite a few different options. And actually I am a member of a couple of Facebook groups for different parts of Europe for pet sitters, where somebody will say, you know, I'm going on holiday for a couple of weeks, we come to the south of France and look after my cat or something.
Yeah.
Which
There's that, and that's not paid, because the other thing is that to be in trusted house sitters, you have to pay for it.
okay, yeah.
The Facebook group presumably is free, which is nice.
It is, and I haven't actually gone on any yet, but I'm considering a couple, I have to say. But
Yeah, HelpX is another one. Yeah.
right. Okay, great. So any more questions coming in? Oh yeah, so some really nice tips. Thank you very much. That's all good. So I'm just thinking, you touched on your work as a coach. Do you want to share a little bit more about your work as a travel coach?
Sure. So, you know, when I quit my job to travel, I was 48 and I looked for a mentor and I couldn't find one. And it seemed to me like everyone doing this was younger than me. And so once I started traveling full time and saw what it was like and how many people said to me, oh, I wish I could do that. And I'm like, you can. I became the mentor that I was looking for. So what I do is I work with my clients to transition from the, you know, full-time normal life to a full-time travel life. And that can be different depending who you are, because, you know, now that there's the world of remote work, some people want to retire, some people want to take a sabbatical, some people want to do what I did and quit and, you know, just go for it. So depending on which context, I would work with my clients to do things like overcome the what ifs, the anxieties, all of the mindset things, the emotional fears that keep us from actually starting to even take action towards the lifestyle. The biggest part of my work is around money, because everyone, of course, wants to know how to afford it. But also, though I'm not an accountant or a financial planner, I do know how to set a travel budget. And I do know, I teach these, what I call travel styles, because I think it's so important to understand how you want to travel, to set the right budget so you don't go and start traveling and 3 weeks in realize you've made a huge mistake because you can't afford to travel the way you want to. And then the other piece I do is logistics, like we talked about, you know, what am I to do with my mail? What about visas, vaccinations? What are all the things that I need to prepare? What am I going to do with my stuff? Should I keep my home? Should I let my home go? Yeah. Like all the what if, you know, all those questions. I'm really helping my clients to feel empowered to be able to create and afford the full-time travel lifestyle.
And yeah, you talk about, you know, helping with budget, because you've done this for such a long time, you know what it costs. So we can all Google it and we can all sort of, you know, have an idea, but you actually know how much you need, and you know where the pitfalls are.
Yeah. And
so,
I know a lot of different countries that, you know, where a budget is more likely to work than not.
Right. And do you offer that then as an ongoing thing? So it's not like a one-off, we'll have a meeting and then off you go. You can offer sort of like ongoing help if people are getting started and beginning to travel, they can continue to work with you.
Yeah, so I try to work with people where they are. So if we're going to work individually, typically I'll do like 1 to 3 months, depending on what it is that they want to work on. And I'm working with a client now on who wants to quit her job. So we're working on, well, what would that look like? And, you know, mitigating all of the fear around that. And then I also have self-study programs. So if you wanted to, you know, if your budget was lower or you just didn't want to work one-on-one, you felt like you wanted to just do it all yourself, I offer that. And I also offer just a one-off consulting call if, you know, if that's all that you want. So many different ways to work on it. Great.
And we could touch on that again at the end of the call, but Lisa is asking, how much do you actually spend a year on full-time travel?
So it depends on so many things, right? Where in the world I am, and am I staying with someone? Am I doing house sitting? So I don't necessarily look at it per year. I'm trying to stay in a budget per month of $2,000 to $4,000. So, you know, 2 times 12 is what, $24,000, and 48,000 for 4,000, right? So realistically, the way I'm traveling is $24,000 to $48,000 a year, depending on how I'm doing things. because I'm also home now a bit more looking after my parents, I'm not traveling as much, so I'm spending even less. So, but that's sort of an estimate of how much I'm spending per year. But how much you spend depends on so many of the factors that we've talked about during this call.
Yeah. And you started out at the very beginning by talking about how you really kind of maximize points and so you kind of really make use of the best ways to make it affordable by staying in hotels where you've collected points, and everything you spend, making sure you get something back for that.
Absolutely.
Which I think is a good strategy in life anyway, but yeah.
Yes.
But so we're sort of coming up to the top of the hour, and we've had some great, I was going to say, we've had some
Yes.
great questions, and here's another one.
So
Credit cards, there you go, for accruing points. Yeah, I use BA Amex, and that's my personal one because I like to collect BA points. But
so if you're interested, so I wrote an article, it's on Travel Awaits website about how to pick the right credit cards. I personally use a Delta Amex and a Marriott Visa. So I was lucky in my working life to have Marriott as a customer, and we had a really good relationship, and somehow they upgraded me to gold level status for life. So it was just a natural fit for me to keep accruing. And then I chose Delta because I like Delta already, and I'm not going to say they're perfect, but for example, this past week or so ago, I had a flight to Florida, woke up at 3:30 in the morning for my 7 a.m. flight, found out it was canceled. And this is after coming back from South Korea. It was a whole thing. But anyway, for the first time ever, they proactively reached out to me, deposited about 7,500 bonus miles into my account, and paid for my taxi to JFK for my new flight. So, loyalty gets you free bags. So I get like at least one, if not two, free checked bags for my international flights. And that can save you a lot of money, not paying exorbitant fees for checking your bags. How to pick the right cards. And I mentioned, so Delta Amex, you have an Amex, I have a Visa. I mean, I don't know what country you're all from and what options are available, but if I were starting over, I'd be thinking about what are, say, the top 10 countries I think I want to visit, what airlines go to those places, and which carrier domestically partners with most of those airlines, so I could use my points on those partner airlines. So that's that. And with the hotels, same thing. If I didn't have that Marriott situation, would I pick them? I don't know. I mean, Marriott isn't everywhere, but they did buy like every hotel chain out there. So some piece of them is now there. But yeah, thinking about, again, where am I going? Which hotel chains exist where I want to go? I like to make things last. So typically I will fly in economy class because it's cheaper than paying for business. I did treat myself because it was cheap to a business class seat from Kuala Lumpur up to Seoul. It was fabulous. I'm really glad I did that. And then with Marriott, I typically don't stay at the big JW Marriotts or the Ritz-Carlton or whatever, because that's going to wipe out my whole account in like 2 nights. But I was mentioning earlier, I stayed in Sandton in South Africa and outside Joburg, and it was 7,000 points a night for a lovely room. So I try to pick rooms that are 7,000 to 10,000 a night.
Yeah. I think it's just being diligent in kind of how you spend and who you spend with, and then making sure you can kind of use those points to the best, get the most out of them. Absolutely. So look, Joanne who says Chase, Sapphire and Sapphire Reserve, Capital One, Quicksilver, United. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different options. You're right. It's kind of where you want to go.
There's a website. Now, I always liked it, but I've heard recently it's not as good, but it's called thepointsguy.com, right?
Yeah.
And they update their website constantly with their, best recommended credit cards. So, definitely take a look at that. I'm not saying it's the Bible, but absolutely take a look.
Yeah. So thank you for all those questions. We've covered some ground. Wow, yeah, great questions, and keep them coming if you have stuff still. And then we've got time if you've got time. So actually, Charlotte's just putting in go with less Facebook group. Right, thank you. Oh, right. Thank you, Rima. Yes, that's great. And before we do all kind of jump off, if we have to, I know you talked about your online courses, and you had an offer that you wanted to extend, I think, to people who've kind of joined today.
Yeah. So I have, as I mentioned, several online courses, and the offer I'd love to extend is it's called Money for Travel Bootcamp. And really that's the thing that people are always asking me is, how do I afford full-time travel? And as I mentioned, I believe it's a blend of strategies. So this bootcamp is really about helping you to create the money that you need before you even start traveling. And then understand when you're traveling, how to cut those costs, how to make money while you go. And then the program includes as a bonus, an ebook that I sell separately called How to Afford Full-Time Travel. And that ebook gives you the formulas that you need to personally calculate how much do you need per month or per year to travel in the style that you want. There's even another ebook with it included as a bonus that goes into each of the styles and what it's like to travel in them. So that's all rolled up into this program. And I'm also offering a 20% coupon off working with me privately. So all of that is included in Money for Travel Bootcamp. And I'm extending a 10% discount to anyone from your group that that buys it. And I think we have the URL and there's a discount code.
I will send them out, yep, to everybody. Yep.
And the first 5 people that buy it, I will also toss in, I have a resource library I'm building. So right now I mentioned I wrote an ebook on how do you figure out where to go when you can go anywhere? Right. So that ebook is there. There's a checklist for international travel. I'm about to upload an ebook about strategies to avoid being lonely as a solo traveler. And that resource library will grow. And so you'll get, the first 5 of you will get that. It's a separate product, but I'm going to include it for the first 5 of you. And any ebooks I add to that library, you'll get free of charge as well.
Fabulous. Fantastic. I mean, there's so much there. And yes, I will send out a recording. I just dropped that into the chat and you can obviously go back and look at that. But I think to have access to all that information, because I know you have so much information that you have put into one kind of great sort of resource. So that's fantastic. So thank you for that. And I'll send out it will be tomorrow now because it's getting a little bit late now in London. So I'll send that out tomorrow. An email with the recording and also then a link and a code for everyone who would like to take advantage of that. So you'll have all that in your email tomorrow.
Cool. And if you want, I can put my email in here. If you guys have follow-up questions, you're also welcome to reach out to me if you want.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, is there anything else that anybody has, any burning questions, anything last? I'll just unmute everybody. Oh, can I unmute everybody in one go? No, I can't. But you can unmute yourself if you'd like to say anything. And thank you for your lovely comments. I love doing these sessions. I just think that was just like really very, very, really interesting. I could talk about this all night, but yeah. Thank you. Looks as though, look me up in South Africa. Will do, definitely. Thank you all for being so engaged and thank you for your great questions. Oh, Alaska, somebody's in Alaska. There you go.
Oh, Alaska is cool.
Brilliant. See, I love all this, just look at us. We're such an international bunch. It's great, isn't it? So thanks again, everyone. Look out for the recording and happy solo travels, be they short-term or long-term. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you are. And thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. It's always so good to hear from you. So many great things.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Very, very useful. Thanks a lot.